Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegades Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Hey, Tom, happy Tuesday. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. How are you today, Bob?
I'm good. You're in a new location.
New office space for me. Yes.
I like that. I like that. You didn't want to work in the office I offered you. You decided to go your own way.
Well, that's what Renegades do. That's how Renegades roll,
Fair enough. All right. There you have it. So,
yeah, it is what it is. That's okay.
I like it. I like it. Looks nice.
Thanks. I wanted to make sure I got my quote up, and it's maybe a little hard to read, but I'll have to maybe work on that a little bit. So,
okay.
Either way, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Antidote, our daily broadcast and podcast, where we try to provide that one thing, the antidote, thing to help you move forward along your own unique pathway to success. Each day we'll talk about a topic, and at the end, we'll try to provide that one thing. So if you are listening on the podcast and you want to share a remark or give us feedback or share your one thing on the podcast, please do. We also hope that you'll subscribe, join, and share it with your friends. If you are watching on one of our live streams, I'm trying to think of what that was, please feel free to share a comment, because we know that it will have an impact on what's happening and it will benefit someone. So given that, one of the ways that we start every day is Bob shares, our new way to share every day, I almost forgot this, is what are you celebrating today, Bob? Because celebrations are how we start the day.
So I did another video about this, but I actually typically I run about 12-minute miles. This morning I ran 11:29. So I shaved more than 30 seconds off 2 miles. That's serious. My whole body aches right now, but
because you ran a mile in 11:29.
Yes, 2 miles in 11:29.
2 miles.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, 2 miles each in 11:29. I'm not a fast runner.
Right. So that was your pace, was 11:29 per mile.
Correct. Which is down from 12 minutes typically.
That's good. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm celebrating that. And it was a day that I was going to blow it off because I was up late for the Ravens game and got up late this morning, but powered through. And there's a video, if you're in the Facebook group, the Ring Renegades Facebook group, I posted a video about how this came about.
I'll have to check it out. And I'm celebrating, we're going to go with the athletic theme today. I'm celebrating that I did a double workout last night. And
wow.
I'm celebrating the soreness that I'm feeling this morning, knowing that sometimes with a little bit of soreness is when you're going to make strides. So that's what
look at that. That can apply to business, right? Need to have a little pain to get a little gain.
Yeah, it's funny, that song was playing in the gym last night.
Which song?
And isn't there a song about having pain to no pain, no gain? I don't know. That was playing, definitely. Either that or I was imagining that in my head.
I like the second one a lot better.
While I was having pain. And I got thinking about, why do we have to have pain to gain something? Why can't we just gain something without pain?
If only.
Well, sometimes I think you do. I think there's opportunities.
Well, when we're moving outside of what's comfortable, there's going to be discomfort, which could be pain. Right?
True. That's true.
You can't move from comfortable to uncomfortable and not feel some sense of pain, even if it's just, this feels really weird.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it doesn't have to be pain like, I'm stop doing it to me. That really hurts. But it certainly is. It can cause emotional pain. It can cause mental pain. It can cause a lot of different feelings that I think we encompass in that word pain.
That's fair.
He's stupefied. He's got nothing to say. I've totally taken that way further than he thought possible.
No, I thought you were still going, but that's all.
Oh, okay. So, Tom, we should move to our national celebration today.
What is our
but
national
before we do that, do you know what ants on a log are?
I do. It's celery filled with peanut butter and raisins on top.
You impress me. It is National Ants on a Log Day. Now, this is legitimate. I checked it out.
You sure it's not real ants on a real log?
I don't think it is. This is from the McKinley Health Center at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And they say this is one of the healthiest snacks that you can eat, because there's all kinds of good stuffs in the raisins and the peanut butter and in the celery. I could bore you with all the details, but I love it. It's a renegade kind of day. You know, it's just one of those off the beaten path things that I didn't even know what ants on the log was until I read this morning. I'm like, ants on the log day? What the? So I've learned something this morning. I just thought it was one of those fun things to bring out. And
it goes with the theme of what each of us were celebrating.
Yeah, correct. And since we're on that, I will add Tim's comment, which is I'm celebrating walking 10,000 steps this morning. It's a little over 6 miles and took me an hour and 29 minutes. So Bob is at an 11:29 mile running, and I do a 15-minute mile walking. Yes, I know. I'm well aware. Here's the thing. It's not about how fast you go.
And it's not a competition.
It's not. No, my competition is with myself. So now that I'm at 11:29, my goal is 11:28 or better. I'm never going to run a 5-minute mile. It's not going to happen. And I don't want to.
Okay. You might. I won't tell you what my fastest 5-minute, my fastest mile is.
You told me, I just let it go. When you told me about 8-9 months ago, I was like, yeah, whatever.
I got to do it again this month. That's on the list of challenges for this month.
It was under 7 minutes, right?
Yeah, and I'm nowhere near that right now. But yeah, I think it was 6:57, which felt like.
That means you could lap me every mile.
I wouldn't do that, though. I'd just stay behind you.
And laugh. Good times.
Yeah, absolutely. Raisins, ants on a log, huh?
Yeah, ants on a log. When was the last time you had that?
Never. I'm not a big raisin fan.
Okay, I'm not either. I'm not a big celery fan either.
And I've gone from peanut butter to either almond butter or sunflower butter.
Sunflower, yeah. Look at you, Mr. Healthy. Well, Tom, I'm sure people would love to hear more about our athletic pursuits, such as they are, and our dietary interests. But why don't we move to the topic today?
Sounds like a great idea.
Thank you. I always do.
Our topic for the day, it's actually topic for the week, is how renegades roll. And last week we talked a little bit about being a renegade, so we're continuing that theme this week and talking a little bit about how they roll. Which again, if you are not familiar with that, how you roll, it's a phrase from, I don't know, a decade or two back. And so we have just incorporated it. And it also is a section in Bob's book, The Renegade Way. So if you want to get a copy of it, you can just go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com and pick up your copy of The Renegade Way, and then you will better understand how renegades roll. We'll also talk about it probably this week and next week, I would imagine. So the piece of that today is listen to understand, which I think is a topic that is desperately needed in our world today, as I think less and less people choose to listen to understand. They just want to share their point of view. So why don't you give us some thoughts on that, Bob?
All righty. I learned to listen to understand back when I was in college. I studied to be a journalist. And to be a journalist, you have to ask good questions and you have to listen to the answers. Being a journalist, no one cares what you think. They really don't. You're just gathering information from people and then trying to convey whatever is real in that moment. And so I got really good at asking questions and just waiting for the answer and trying to dissect what the answer meant, not getting ready to answer back and go, well, that's not true or that's wrong. Just you gather it. And if someone told you something was wrong and you couldn't corroborate it, you would say that in your story. Mr. Johnson said the sky was blue. Police say the sky was actually gray at the time of the accident. And you would let the reader decide. And then I got into business and I would go to networking events. And rather than listen to understand for a while, I would listen for the chance to go, oh, wait, that's me. I do that. Hire me. Oh, yes, you're talking about what I can do for you. Over here, real tall guy, you gotta come see me. And I think many of us go through that in the evolution of our business. We don't listen to understand. We listen to interject. We listen to get the opportunity. And there's a huge difference there. Listening to understand opens the door to discovering what it is people actually are looking for. It also starts you on that path of know, like, and trust. Once you start to, hey, okay, so I'm a little confused by this. Can you explain this to me? This is really fascinating. I really would like to know more about that. When the person starts to tell you, they know that you genuinely care about them and their situation, that you're not trying to plug your solution into anyone who has a business. You know, I think of there was an era of merchant credit card companies. Remember when you go to networking events and there were like 5 of those? And they would go to every business person and say, hey, I don't know what your merchant credit card company is, but we can give you a better deal. And they would all say that. They didn't ask, they didn't say like, well, how many transactions do you do a month, Bob? And what's your average amount of your transaction? And what are you trying to do with that money? Do you want to hold that money? Do you want to be able to move that money into your checking account? They weren't asking the questions. They were just bang, bang, bang. Let's hand a card to everyone and we'll get some people. But when I needed a merchant credit card solution, I talked to someone for almost an hour about what I was trying to do with my business, where the revenue was coming. And they actually told me not to use one of their services. They told me to use PayPal. They said, for what you're doing, the level of transactions, paying that fee to PayPal makes a whole lot. Whoops. Little camera problem there. Sorry, my camera just dropped.
Okay.
That they said go with PayPal, which is not what you would expect a merchant credit card company representative to say to you. However, that person said that to me, and I ended up referring 4 or 5 people to that person because, like, I knew that they would tell the person what the best solution was, not sell them on their solution. And I think when we listen to understand, that's how we're perceived by our audience. That, wow, you know, he genuinely cares about what's right for me, not what's going to serve his business purposes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so often that people feel like they have to get out what they have to say, so that people will understand where they're coming from and where they're at. And in reality, you know, what we really need to do is understand where they're at. It was a thing that I learned.
Tom, your shirt has gone crazy.
I know something about my lighting is going on here. I don't know.
Okay, all right. Just wanting you to be aware.
Oh, I've been aware
for you folks on the podcast. It looks like Tom has like dove into the mud in a white shirt and emerged from it.
Yes.
And if he moves, it does even more. It's interesting.
Yeah, I got to work on that. I don't
Definitely
know.
a good morning to be on the podcast. Huh?
Wow, until you let everyone know about it. Now it's not so beneficial. You know, the funny thing is, one of the things I learned, one of the things I really value about my experience as a fundraiser was the real goal of, the goal, many fundraisers look at the goal as raising money, and that is absolutely the case. Well, the way I learned was it's about building relationships. And so you better understand where the person is at and how their relationship to your organization would encourage them to want to give to the organization because of not only the relationship they have with you, but most importantly, the relationship they have with the organization and their experience with it. And so we were always taught that just keep asking questions and just keep asking questions so that you learn. You learn about their experience, you learn about the way they've been connected, and you better understand who they are. And, you know, there's an old saying in the business is that you have two eyes and one mouth. So you should listen twice as much as you speak. And I would
hold on. Two eyes and one mouth?
Sorry.
I mean, two ears and one mouth.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, I was going to say, if you're listening with your eyes, you're really good.
Yeah. Well, I think you can understand through watching. It's almost like I would almost add to this listening and watching to understand, because you can gain a lot from people's either way. The fact that we had two ears, we should listen twice as much as we speak. And honestly, I got to the point where I tried to listen even more. Because one of the things I think people love to do is talk about themselves. And when they talk about themselves, you start to better understand. You know, if you're a renegade and one of my favorite things to do at networking events was go and ask somebody like what they did and listen and figure out how long it was going to be that they were going to go on talking about what they did before they would ever stop to try to understand where I was at and whether whatever they were doing had any value whatsoever for me. And sometimes that game was short. And people would give it very, kind of here's who I help and how I help them. And then they would ask me, well, share a little bit about yourself. And then there were times when people would go on for 20 plus minutes and just tell me about all the features and benefits and everything and why it was so great and all the people they could help and why I desperately needed it. And what I started to understand was those people who spoke less, they were the people I wanted to connect and engage with. And usually the ones that we would be like, okay, hey, let's follow up. I really have enjoyed this conversation because we both took the time to understand each other in a way to try to be beneficial to one another rather than a one-sided conversation. And I found that when I did follow up with those people who spoke for 10, 15, 20 minutes, is that the follow-up conversation was exactly the same. It was all about them and all about what they had to offer, and very little about trying to understand who or what I am or what my needs were. I mean, the number of times that I was pitched on things that I had no need for, I could count. It would take fingers and toes and more to figure that all out. And I think that that's, something that I started to even more understand the more I listened of not only what was going on with the person, also how could I better decide how I would then act or react. And it allowed me to be more effective in my communication, because when people would share, well, here's what's going on, I could be, okay, well, have you thought about this? And then they'd be like, I hadn't, either I hadn't thought about it or had, or, I think when we listen, we're able to provide solutions or provide the right question to help them find solutions, because we truly are trying to figure out where they're at. And I think that too often we just want to inform. We just want to tell. We just want to share all the wisdom and whatever that we have, which can be valuable if it is something that the person we are sharing with is looking for.
I would agree with you. I would add to that when you talk about two ears and one mouth, part of the listening I've found as I get older is listening for what people don't say. Sometimes what they don't tell you that you can observe is more interesting and more indicative than what they do tell you. If they're telling you all the same stuff everyone told you, okay. When they tell you something different, or when they don't say something, they just stop. You know what? You don't want to hear what I'm really thinking. Yes, I do. Desperately. More than you can imagine, because that's where the insight is. And one of the greatest things for me And one of the ways I gauge conversations is if the person goes, wow, no one's ever asked me that question before. Oh, that's a great question. Wow, man, you've given me something to think about. Those are the types of discussions that people remember. That's the type of discussion that when you call them 2 weeks later or 2 months later, they go, hey, Bob, really so great to hear from you. They pick up on the first or second ring versus the person who has just vomited everything about their business. I don't really want to hear from you. I just don't want to know more about your business. I'm sorry. I know more than I really want to know already. But when the person is genuinely engaged in a discussion, sometimes not even about work stuff. You know, I've talked to people at networking events about running. And we've talked about running for a half hour. Don't even talk about business. But when I called 2 weeks later, hey, you said you were doing the 5K yesterday. How'd it go? Oh my God, it was so hard. Then we get to business. And that's kind of how you and I fell into things with each other. We didn't talk a lot about our business at the beginning. We were just, I think we bonded over shared frustrations about how building a business could go. And lo and behold, here we are almost 10 years later. And that's kind of what we're trying to change together. And I think if you went back to our first discussion, we talked about some of the same issues we're talking about now. We didn't have the language we have now, but it's always been there. And it's what bonds us. And we've grown from there. But that was the foundation. And like you've said several times, I think you're right. I don't think we ever really sold each other ever. And there were times when we could have.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Here we are, business partners. And so listening, understanding, recognizing that, wow, every time I talk to Tom, he gives me something to think about that changes how I see the world in a positive way. I want to spend more time with Tom. That's it. Even if it doesn't lead to a direct dollar sign every time we get together, it still has huge value. And that's from the listening. You know, I remember the time I told you about my rowing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get myself motivated to row, and you came up with a great solution for me. And it was like, wow, this is so not what I expected today, but it was so what I needed that day. And I think when we listen to understand, we have a chance of actually providing people with what they need in that moment. Not what we want from them, but what they need. And need's much more powerful than want.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Tom, what's your one thing that today's antidote, that thing that's going to change us as we go into the rest of the day and just be like, dun, dun, no pressure.
Well, I'm thinking about this, and I'm not sure I'm going to say this in a way that people will understand. So they're going to have to really listen. I'm going to turn it a little bit, is because I think that I was thinking about this as, you know, as I work with clients, I think sometimes they think in a coaching relationship that I'm going to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm. that I have all the answers that's going to solve their challenges, and because they haven't been able to figure it out themselves. And what I think is really that they have to listen to themselves when asked a question that is going to get them to consider a different perspective. You know, so often, like you said, you know, you ask a question, somebody's like, well, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I think that's part of it is so because they've never been asked it before, they haven't been able to listen to themselves come up with what the solution might be. And I think it's fascinating to me to be working with one of my clients and they share, here's what's going on. So I have an understanding to not only try to understand like where are they at, and also to think about, okay, what's as you said, what's behind, what are they not saying? And typically when I then ask the question that gets to what are they not saying, they actually pause because they're not sure how to respond. Because typically that means that it's something that they either had never thought of or they thought of and knew a long time ago and had forgotten. And so it's really sometimes them
Well,
listening.
they don't want to consider it, right?
Well, correct. There is
They
that.
dismissed it because it's too complicated or too whatever, right?
Or too painful to
Yeah.
consider.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes when someone else shares something, it allows us to listen to ourselves and think about, okay, I have a different understanding of that because, and this happens on this show all the time. You say something, and while listening, I better understand where I am at and how I might respond. And if I was just trying to be like, all I want to do is just get out my point. It's one of the reasons I sort of like the fact that we kind of do this with no script, is we have to listen to.
Wait, we kind of do this with no script? You mean there's some sort of script somewhere?
Well, if you consider it, we have an opening. You do your little jig. We'll have some banter. We celebrate. We
don't know the words that we're going to say. We don't know. We don't even talk about the topic much.
Correct.
There's no pre-production meeting.
No, and yet there is a format that we follow. And so there is some planning, some structure that goes into it. And I think that the valuable thing for me is not only do we get to share, so others get to listen and maybe better understand where they're at, we also get to listen to one another and clarify for ourselves where that's at. And a lot of it is because we start.
And also get the comments, which really help.
Right. And that changes what's real in the moment. And so we have to then think about, okay, how do we take whatever the conversation is, whatever the thought is, by listening and then go. I mean, we could easily do this where we're like, okay, Bob, here's the topic. You think about your answer. Boom, go. And I could sit over here and I'd be worried about what am I going to say and how am I going to say it? Because I've already written it out.
Pre-scripted 3 bullets each, right?
Correct.
Tom, give us your 3 bullets.
And then boom, 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 here are mine. And it never interacts. And I think maybe that's as I get down to the one thing, this one thing, probably multiple things in there is, and now
it's Tom's today's antidotes.
Correct. Is that when we don't listen, we share what we want to share, not maybe what needs to be shared. Because we've taken the time to actually listen and understand and figure out, okay, well, how does what I have to say, or how is what you have said impact what I would want to say? And I think that was one of the things I learned as a fundraiser, is that with I had a whole bunch of questions that I could ask that were kind of standard, and yet it always was based on whatever their response was. So it wasn't like, okay, here's question number 1. All right, we did that. Number 2, number 3. And okay, so I've asked my 10 questions. It was more like, here's the question. And then they share some information. And if I don't listen and just worried about my questions, I won't truly be able to understand where they're at. The opportunity, when I listen and they talk about this professor, let's say, and I was like, oh yeah, tell me more a little bit about that. Why was that so important? Not completely off the script. I have a better understanding of who and what they are, because I've actually taken time to listen of where what's real for them, and not just dive in with what's real for me.
I like that. I'm going to go in a different direction today.
You gotta get your bullet points in.
No, I don't have 3 bullet points. I got one little thing, because you had a lot going on there, so I'm going to really compress it. And what I would say, my one thing today is, ask the question that you're dying to ask someone, that you feel like you shouldn't ask, because that question is usually what sparks the real discussion. I find all the time that in my head I go, I shouldn't ask this person about this. But when I do, it really leads to a much deeper understanding. I was talking to a woman who volunteered that her husband was involved in 9/11 peripherally, and ended up dying because of some of the respiratory stuff. And I said to her, can I ask you a question? She's like, yeah, sure. And I said, I'm just curious. Did you get a sense that this was coming along? She's like, yeah, I kind of knew it was coming along. I could just see he was getting worse and worse. And I said, what did you do? And she said, I couldn't do anything. And she totally broke down. And she's like, no one's ever allowed me that space. She was falling apart, but she was afraid to talk about it. No one was willing to ask the question. I'll ask the question. I'm okay with the answer. And often it's the question that we're dying to ask someone. You know, you got to do it respectfully. You know,
Sure.
You can't say to the murderer when you're interviewing them, did you kill your wife? That doesn't work. I've tried that, but I've also, when I was a reporter, I also had the situation where a guy was accused of doing something really bad, and I was interviewing him for something else, and he volunteered. He's like, you're going to write about me again because I'm guilty of doing something really bad. What? What are you... He's like, I don't know why I told you that. I know why he told me that. He told me that because I was genuinely listening and he thought that I was safe.
Right.
And he didn't realize that what he was telling me could lead to trouble because we're all looking for someone to hear us.
Correct.
You know, we want to be heard throughout our day, all day. So how can you make someone heard? Whoever it is, the person who cleans your office, how do you make that person heard? How do you ask them the question? Hey, you watched the Ravens game last night? Oh, what do you think about Lamar Jackson? That's a person who doesn't get heard.
Correct. So here's the thing I would add as I've been listening to try to understand.
Nice.
If I was going to go back and redo the topic for today,
We don't get do-overs.
Well, I'm going to admit that there might have been a different way to do this, which I think is a part of how Renegades roll.
Okay. What would that topic be? I'll write down in the comments.
I think it should be
this episode to
ask,
Uh-huh.
and listen to understand, because I think your point is really good. So often we don't ask the question, whether of ourselves or of others, for the information that we really need to know. I was having this conversation yesterday. It's fascinating to me, with a client who was trying to talk about feedback and was struggling. And they said, I've struggled my entire career with how to give feedback so that it was appropriate, you know, and how do I give it in a way that matches the way I want to be a leader? And I said, well, you know, the challenge is everybody's different. And I said, what is the best way to find out something that you don't know the answer to? And they paused and they said, well, I guess you could just ask. And I said, absolutely. And I said, that's the thing we don't do, right? We want to tell everybody what's going on, or we expect that someone is just going to tell us how they're feeling, where they're at, what their pain point is, what they want to buy. You know, it's not like, you know, many businesses are not like a supermarket where you walk in and I know exactly what I want to purchase. I just have to find it. And if I can't find it, I go to somebody and say, hey, I need to buy peanut butter, celery, and raisins. Where do I find all of that stuff?
Well done.
And someone will tell you, right? So
Yes.
in that regard, the client is telling you exactly what they need. So often, the client isn't telling you exactly what they need unless we ask and then listen to where they say. So I think that that's the piece of it, because I got thinking about this whole listening thing. And so often we can't listen unless we ask the question rather than tell them something that we believe to be real. What do you think about that?
Pamela suggests that we have the title be How to Have Deeper, More Meaningful Conversations with Others. I like that.
As well. I like that as well.
Won't fit in our little format, but I like that. And you know, I think the key word there to me, well, two key words if you look at it, deeper and more meaningful. And when we talk about someone knowing, liking, and trusting us to buy from us, deeper, more meaningful conversations puts us on that path. You don't have a deep discussion with someone you don't care about. You don't have a meaningful discussion with someone that you don't find some sort of bond over because it's not safe. And so if
Correct.
you're having deeper, more meaningful discussions, it's probably going to lead to more meaningful opportunities.
No, I think those, one, thank you, Pamela, for sharing that, because I think that is true. That might have been another way to put it, which I like. Bob, is true. That would have been hard to put on my graphic. So we would have said, have more meaningful conversations, or deeper.
Yes.
All right. It's probably about time we wrap this show up, because I think we did 2 topics in one: listen to understand, and then ask and listen to understand, and have more deeper, meaningful conversations. So
we have a lot going on this episode. This might be one that you have to go back and listen to again, or if you're on the podcast and you're listening to it at double speed, slow it down to 1.75 and you'll get some extra nuggets out of it.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you have something you'd like to share, please feel free to put it in the comments. Share your one thing, because we know that it will have value. Someone may be looking for that piece of information. And the challenge on this is you don't get the chance always to ask. But by sharing it, someone gets a chance to better understand who and where you were coming from. So thanks so much for being a part of our show today. We hope that you have enjoyed it. If you are not yet a member of our Ring of Renegades Facebook group, where we have created the space to have these kind of meaningful conversations with others, if we are willing to ask the question and then be willing to listen, to understand. There's over 1,000 people in there. And I would wonder how many of those members have asked other members a question to better understand where they are at and what's going on. Or are they passively sitting there waiting for someone to tell them what they need? How about that for a comment at the end of the show? So if you are in that group, ask a question. See what you can understand. If you're not yet in
randomly pick someone in the group and just ask them a question?
Sure, why not?
I like that. I like that idea.
So if you think that's a good idea and it's a community that you'd like to be a part of, it's easy to join. Just go to Facebook, search for Ring of Renegades, and then you can ask to join, because it is a private group, because we are creating a space where it's okay to reach out to someone you don't know and ask them a question. And we want that space to be available. So all you have to do is tell us why you're a renegade, pretty much how you roll, and you can become a part of our growing community where we are helping renegades take their next step along their own unique pathway to success. Thanks so much for being with us today. I hope that you have an amazing day, and that we will see you here tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, for our next edition of today's Antidote. Have a great day, everyone.
Hey, embrace the renegading you.
Thanks for listening to today's Antidote, powered by the Renegade Success Network. The Renegade Success Network helps you confidently create your own unique pathway to success. To learn more about the Renegade Success Network and how you can take your next step, follow us on Twitter, connect on LinkedIn, or join the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. For full details on how you can join our community, go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com. Embrace the renegade in you.
Whoa, we